Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be looking at the 2024 presidential election. I haven't done a prediction since May and now it's August, so I figured it's time to update. But before I start, I'd like to say if you like my content, subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment, and turn on the notification bell. And with that said, let's get into it. So recently polling has been showing a very close race between Joe Biden and Donald Trump in the national popular vote. I believe the Real Clear Politics average right now has Biden up by 1 point. But the state polls are showing a much different story in some cases, so we're just going to go through each state and take a look. So I'm going to start off with the solid states for Donald Trump, and those are going to be Montana, Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, Nebraska at large and its 3rd congressional district, Kansas, Oklahoma, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, and South Carolina. As for the solid states for Joe Biden, those are going to be Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, Colorado, Illinois, Virginia, we'll add New Mexico too, the District of Columbia, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, New York, Maine at large, and Maine's 1st congressional district. Next, we're going to take a look at the likely states for Donald Trump, and I'm going to start with the state of Alaska. Alaska is a state that has been trending away from Republicans for a while. I believe it's swung left in every election since 2008. Donald Trump won it by 15 in 2016, and he only won it by 10 in 2020. I believe these trends are going to continue in 2024. I don't think it's going to be as drastic as the swing from 2016 to 2020, but I do think it's going to drop below 10 points. I think Trump probably wins it by between 8 and 9 points, so I'm calling Alaska likely Republican. Next up is going to be Nebraska's 1st congressional district. Now, I used to have this one as solid Republican, but then I thought about it, and we're going to get to Nebraska's 2nd in a little bit here. But the point is that Nebraska's 2nd, due to redistricting, became more Republican. But to become more Republican, it had to take some of the Republican areas from the 1st district, which made the 1st district less Republican. So in this new 1st congressional district, Donald Trump only won it by about 11 in 2020. And if Nebraska trends left again, which I anticipate it will, I do think the 1st district will probably fall below that 10% margin threshold that I have for solid. So I'm calling the 1st district likely Republican. Next up is going to be the state of Ohio. Now, Ohio is a state that has been trending towards Republicans in recent years. Obama won the state in 2012, and then Trump won it by about 8 points. And then in 2020, he won it by about 8 points again. Now, a lot of pundits have Ohio as solid Republican, but I'm keeping it as likely Republican because I think that the rural trends that are making Ohio so Republican are going to be slightly canceled out by the suburban trends that are going to hurt Donald Trump in the state. So I think Ohio is mostly going to be stagnant in 2024 from 2020. So I think Trump probably wins it by around 8 to 9 points. Next up is going to be the state of Florida. Florida is a state that has been famously trending towards Republicans in recent years. It's one of the only states in 2020 that Trump actually expanded his margin in. And that is largely because Hispanic voters in Florida are much more Republican than in the rest of the country. Ron DeSantis won his governor's race in 2022 by over 19 points after only winning by a fraction of a percent in 2018. So it is very clear that Florida is trending towards Republicans. So I do think that Donald Trump's going to expand his margin again in Florida. I think he's probably going to win by around 6 points, so I am calling Florida likely Republican. Finally, Maine's 2nd congressional district is going to be likely Republican. Maine's 2nd district is another area that has been trending towards Republicans. Obama won it by a pretty hefty margin, and then in 2016, Trump won it by 10, and in 2020, he only won it by 7. But I do think it's probably going to hold around there, around the 7 to 8 point margin, so I am calling it likely Republican again. Now for the likely Democrat states, and actually we're going to start with the district, Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. This is the home of Omaha and a lot of its suburbs. In 2016, Donald Trump won it narrowly, and then in 2020, Joe Biden flipped it by about 6 points, which was a huge shift. Like I said before, this district did take part of the old 1st district and become more Republican due to redistricting. But I think that Joe Biden's going to do better in the suburbs in 2024 than he did in 2020, so I'm still calling this likely Democrat. Next up is going to be the state of Minnesota. In 2012, Minnesota voted for Barack Obama over Mitt Romney by about 7.5 points. And then in 2016, it swung a lot towards Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton did still win the state, but only by about 1.5 points. But that was largely due to the high third-party turnout. Despite that, a lot of people thought Minnesota was going to be relatively competitive in 2020, and then it just wasn't. It voted way further to the left than Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and voted for Biden by about the same margin it voted for Obama by in 2012. The coalitions for Obama and Biden's victories were a lot different, however. In 2016 and 2020, Donald Trump, like in many other parts of the country, he made a lot of inroads in the rural areas, but the suburbs went against him, and that's why Joe Biden was able to carry the state so strongly. I've said it before already, but I think the suburbs are going to swing towards Biden again, and so that's going to cancel out any gains that Trump makes in the rurals in Minnesota. So I do think Joe Biden's probably going to win Minnesota by a similar margin to 2020, maybe a little bit larger, so I am calling it likely Democrat. Finally, we have the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire is another state that's trending towards Democrats. In 2016, Hillary Clinton very narrowly won it, and then in 2020, Biden won it by over 7 points. It is a very white state, but whites in New England do not like Donald Trump or really Republicans in general. And so I do think the whole region is really going to shift towards Democrats in 2024, so I am calling New Hampshire likely Democrat. All right, with all these solid and likely states out of the way, we are starting with Joe Biden at 226 electoral votes and Donald Trump at 179 electoral votes. There's 133 electoral votes left. It's a bit of an uphill climb for Donald Trump, but we will see if he has any path to victory. I'm going to cover the toss-up states going west to east, starting with the state of Nevada. So Nevada is a state that has been trending towards Republicans in recent years. It swung towards Republicans in every election since 2008. It was one of the only states in 2020 to have a better performance for Donald Trump than in 2016. The reason Nevada has been trending towards Republicans is because Republicans have been doing better in the rural areas in Nevada, just like in most of the rest of the country. But it's mostly because Clark County, which is the home of Las Vegas, the biggest city in Nevada, has been trending towards Republicans. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won Clark County by 12 points, and in 2020, Joe Biden only won it by 9, which is why the state shifted towards Donald Trump. And you can even see this in 2022 when Joe Lombardo beat incumbent Governor Steve Sisolak. The reason he was able to win is because he performed a lot better in Clark County than Adam Laxalt did 4 years prior. Now, of course, it helped that Joe Lombardo was the sheriff of Clark County, so he had that name recognition, he had that hometown advantage, but it is still proof that the area is trending towards Republicans. The reason Nevada is not a Republican state yet is because of Washoe County. Washoe County is in the northwest of the state, and that area is home to Reno, and that area is trending towards Democrats. The same can be said about Carson City, which is a little bit south of there. Although that is still voting for Republicans by pretty wide margins, it is trending towards Democrats, which is slowing the Republican trend of the state of Nevada as a whole. In fact, in 2022, in the Senate race, Catherine Cortez Masto was reelected very, very narrowly by less than 1%, which was about a 3-point shift away from her 2016 race. But in 2016, she lost Washoe County, and in 2022, she won it. So that is really what saved her. Now, with all of that in mind, I do think Nevada is going to be very close in 2024. But because of the trends in Clark County, I do think Donald Trump is very, very narrowly going to be able to pick it off by probably less than a point. So I'm calling Nevada tilt Republican. Next up is going to be the state of Arizona. And Arizona is kind of like anti-Nevada. It's been trending towards Democrats for a while, and that's largely because of Maricopa County, which is the home of Phoenix and its suburbs, trending towards Democrats. Maricopa County has so much of Arizona's population, a very large majority, that any leftward trends in Maricopa County are more than enough to counteract any potential gains that Trump makes throughout the rest of the state. We saw in 2022 that Democrats won most of the statewide offices that they don't usually have. And so it's pretty clear that Arizona is not going to be voting Republican for a while for most offices, including the presidential race, and especially not for someone like Donald Trump. So I do think Joe Biden's going to expand on his percentage win there. I think he's probably going to win by around 3 points in Arizona, so I'm calling Arizona lean Democrat. Next up is going to be the state of Texas. Now, a lot of organizations and pundits have Texas as likely Republican, but I don't really think I can justify putting it at likely Republican just because of the trends here. I'm probably starting to sound like a broken record, but the suburbs are really what's doing Republicans in here. All of the big cities in Texas and their suburbs are trending towards Democrats, and the only thing that really is saving Republicans for the time being is the fact that the Rio Grande Valley has kind of been trending towards Republicans, but that is not enough to save them at least not long term. For now, Republicans are fine in Texas. Donald Trump is probably going to win by a lot smaller margin, probably I'd say 3 to 4 points. So I am calling Texas lean Republican, but it is going to swing away from Donald Trump and towards Joe Biden. Next up is going to be the state of Wisconsin, and this is a state that voted for Donald Trump by 0.7 in 2016 and for Joe Biden by 0.6 in 2020. For a while, it looked like Wisconsin was going to go the way of Ohio and Iowa and start trending towards Republicans. But then in 2022, Democrats had a much better year than expected when Tony Evers, the Democratic governor, won re-election. And Ron Johnson, the Republican senator, he did win, but he won by a much smaller margin than expected. Currently, polls have Biden leading in Wisconsin by a very small margin. And in 2016 and 2020, polls underestimated Donald Trump by several points in Wisconsin. But in 2022, they were more accurate and actually underestimated Democrats a little bit. Because of that difference there, it's kind of hard to tell who the polling error is going to be in favor of in 2024. And I think there's a lot of good arguments for why either of these candidates could win. For Biden to win, he would have to do better in the suburbs, especially in the WOW counties. And for Trump to win, he'd have to stop some of the bleeding in the suburbs and do a little bit better in the rurals. Overall, in Wisconsin, I think Trump's rural gains are going to be enough to counteract the suburban losses that he has. So I do think he's going to very narrowly win back Wisconsin by less than a point. So I'm calling Wisconsin tilt Republican. Next up is the state of Michigan. Pretty similar to Wisconsin. Lots of suburbs and lots of white working class voters who voted for Trump in 2016 and then Biden in 2020. I think Biden's mostly going to hold on to these voters, especially since looking at the midterms, Michigan was a lot bluer than people expected. I think Joe Biden is probably going to hang on to Michigan, maybe increase his margin by a point or two. So I am calling Michigan lean Democrat. Next up is going to be the state of Georgia. In 2020, Biden won Georgia in what I guess you could call a minor upset. A lot of people thought that Georgia was in play, but that Biden would only win Georgia if he won by a huge margin nationwide, and most people expected North Carolina and Florida to flip before Georgia. But then Georgia suddenly flipped, and North Carolina and Florida held for Donald Trump. Now, the reason Georgia has been trending towards Democrats is because of two things mostly. Suburbs trending towards Democrats, like I've mentioned, in almost every state so far, and a growing number of black voters in the Atlanta region. However, unlike Arizona, Georgia has proven that it will still vote for Republicans. In 2022, I'm pretty sure Republicans swept all of the major offices in Georgia other than the Senate race. And the only reason the Senate race went blue is because Herschel Walker was the nominee and he had scandals and he wasn't that great of a candidate. Now, that said, Donald Trump has his own scandals too, and he wasn't very popular in Georgia in the first place. He lost it as an incumbent, and Georgia is trending away from Republicans. I do think Joe Biden will still narrowly win Georgia, probably expand on his margin by about a point. So I am calling Georgia tilt Democrat, but I do think it is in play. Moving on to North Carolina. I've seen a lot of copium about North Carolina on the internet. A lot of Republicans are saying that it is a perpetual lean Republican state, and I completely disagree with that. I think North Carolina is trending towards Democrats. I think you can see that from 2016 to 2020, Biden increased on Hillary's margin. Trump won it by about 3 points in 2016. He only won it by about 1.5 points in 2020. Again, I think Biden probably improves on his margins in the suburbs. So I do think North Carolina will probably trend a little bit towards Joe Biden, but I do still think Trump hangs on by a little bit less than he did in 2020. So I am calling it tilt Republican, but I do still think he's going to win it. Finally, moving on to the state of Pennsylvania. Donald Trump won the state in 2016 by 0.7, and then Biden won it by 1.2-ish in 2020. Once again, Trump did better in the rurals, but worse in the suburbs. And usually a lot of Republican strength in Pennsylvania comes from Western Pennsylvania, but Western Pennsylvania has been losing a lot of population, especially compared to Eastern Pennsylvania. That's why Pennsylvania lost an electoral vote after the most recent census. I do think Trump will keep it close, but I do think Biden will still narrowly win Pennsylvania, so I'm calling it tilt Democrat. And with all of these states filled in, we have Joe Biden winning re-election to a second term, 287 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 251. Obviously, we're still 15 months out from the election, so a lot could change. Donald Trump could even potentially go to jail, or there could be an economic recession that would hurt Joe Biden. Anything can happen. It's a long time, but this is my prediction for now. If you guys liked the video, subscribe, leave a like, and comment, and turn on the notification bell. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, what you agree with, and what you disagree with. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Have a great day.